Good afternoon, everyone. You can hear me? Okay. I know this is not the best time to speak because after lunch, typically people tend to slow down a bit. So thank you for being with us this afternoon. Robin and I thought that in view of the context of this best practice competition, it would be good to look at also how, one way to look at identifying a good practice. And with EFQM over the past 25 years, one of the things we've been doing is identifying good practices to share with others so that overall we can elevate the level of organizations in their search for excellence. Just a few things about EFQM first. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. We're a non-profit foundation based in Brussels, focusing on excellence, basically on creating conditions for organizations to increase, to gain competitiveness. The model's been deployed quite heavily in a number of organizations in over 50 countries in the UAE. There's a lot happening around EFQM thanks to strong partnerships here. And EFQM is overall recognized mostly for the contribution to competitiveness and also to creating a culture of continuous improvement. Outside UAE also, we cover with partnerships, similar partnerships in over 30 countries, which allow us to work in as many languages to help organizations locally. Before I go into good practices, or we use the term good practice rather than best practice. Apologize if there's a big disconnect, but this is pretty about the same thing in the end. Before we talk about how to identify good practices, or one way to identify good practice, let me talk to you about first the model that is behind this. And why was the model first established? If you look at how an organization works, there are a number of stakeholders surrounding it, and they have different expectations. If you look, for instance, at the shareholders, we know they're typically financial shareholders, or even in the public sector, there can be a government that provides funding to this organization. And in both cases, private or public, they expect proper use of funding, either with dividends or in the end, service to the population and efficient use of the funds. Obviously, these services that would, this expectation of financial return is based also on having customers. Again, whether the public or private sector, we all have customers in the end, someone the organization works for or works towards. And these customers have expectations that are aimed at around the service that organization give them, the value that you add them, but understanding their expectations so that also product and services can be adapted to their expectations and things like that. In order to deliver those services or products, obviously you have people within the organization, and these people have also a set of expectations. They are in the organization because they like working there, because they enjoy the climate, because they think also they can grow with the organization. And in order for them to be engaged and develop the service and products that are expected by the customers, obviously you need to attend their needs as well. And this organization doesn't work in a bubble, though. You have a society around it. You have an environment. You have associations. You have people working around the plant, for instance, and these people also this society around the organization has also a set of expectations. Obviously, the organizations had to respect the environment, has also to be inclusive in respect to people working around in the area, to work with schools. And also, the organizations have to provide, has to be respected. In other words, has to be transparent, to protect also a strong image of itself, to make sure that these people have a strong image of it. And as you can see, these expectations can be sometimes contradictory. If you look at financial, customer service, people expectations, all these things have to be addressed. But somehow you need to adjust the balance between providing dividend and proper service or attending to people. And how the question is, how do you address all these things? And member leaders of the organizations obviously are behind the bar, it's their task to address all these things. And the model was developed to address all these items, support management, in order to help them address in a balanced way. And the balance is a critical word here. Address in a balanced way all these elements, all these expectations. And in the end only, can the organization provide sustainable performance? You can see on left-hand side and left-hand side of the model, the enablers, basically what the organization does. On the right-hand side, the darker color, the result that the organization obtains. Briefly, management team will devise a strategy. Where do I want to go? Growth, customer satisfaction, new markets, whatever it may be. Based on this strategy, the organization will then define the target, or the leadership will define target. If it's growth, I want to go from 10 to 15, whatever the unit may be, or market share. What is the result at what 5 years out? Or what it maybe also with regard to people, to society. And from this set of results, then you take actions. What am I going to do to grow twofold over the next 5 years? Then it has to do with leadership, with people. I need to develop my people. I need to maybe develop partnership so that I can support that growth strategy and so forth. So this starting point of strategy, then going into expected results, back into action. And I think that's one starting point for identifying a good practice, and that is actions have to be aligned with the strategy. There has to be a clear set of expected results, and that loop needs to be in place, following also a proper deployment of these actions, so that in the end, the results that you've targeted in the first place can be achieved. And if that is done well and in full alignment with strategy, then they can be a good practice. But let me go into more details as to how we can do that. Radar, which is in the title of my presentation here, stems for results, approach, deployment, assessment, and refinement. Basically a tool that we use in two ways. One is to help organizations develop their management, to help them, support them in management. Basically, as I showed before, set of results, what do I do? What are the approaches I put in place in order to achieve the results? Then I'll have the approaches, I deploy, make sure I don't, okay? What are the results I expect? You put in place the approaches, basically the initiatives that will support this set of results or allow me to, hopefully, to reach them. Then I deploy these approaches. Then once deployment, we'll go into more detail as to what this means. Then once deployed, we assess the result over a cycle. And then you, based on the differential between the expected result and the actual results, then you may adjust or refine and then go back into a new set of results and you continue with the loop. This is one use. The other use we have for this is in scoring / identifying good practice. In other words, if you look at an expected results from the previous slide, what am I doing with that? How is, looking at the organization, are the approaches that they've put in place in line or expected to achieve the result? Does it make any sense, or is it actions are here, the results expected are in this direction? Are the approaches sound? And I'll go into again more refined wording for that. These approaches are sound, great, okay, and you can see clearly across the board that they're well structured, they're sound, they're aligned with strategy and so forth. Next question, how are they deployed? Are they deployed just in one unit, or are they deployed wherever it's relevant? Are they deployed in a timely manner? And are they then assessed? Now, if you've deployed, great, the assessor will check, they've been properly deployed through the organization at the right time. If you want to do, for instance, a people engagement survey, you want to do it at certain time, maybe compared to certain presentation from the management or whatever. So timing and deployment is critical. But then also you want to look at the result you obtained from that engagement survey, for instance. As it has allowed me to address my question in terms of people engagement, which was the starting point. And then when I measure the gap, then I can refine and again close that loop. So again, the radar is used both to help management structure the approaches, but also deploy them. But also the second part is in the assessment part, how well is the job done, basically? Am I doing things right? And so we have the model, the 9 criteria at the bottom, which I spoke about, the radar at the top right, and this one third element that completes the picture for the EFQM excellence model, which are the 8 fundamental concepts. I'm not going to spend much time on that. It's basically the what, why are you doing what you're doing? And this is the foundations for excellence. Now, when assessors look at an organization, they are going to see certain things. People within the organization may see different things of themselves. You know, remember, assessors come from the outside. They don't know the organization at first. They get a document from the organization, then they can start to look into it. Then they come on site, and they're going to see certain things. Now, there are things that they will see. And some of those may be known by the organization themselves, some may not. So the assessors may be able to put their finger on something, well, we know we're good here, or we're doing something very unique, or whatever it may be. And in the end, assessors obviously are only going to focus on things that they can see, and they may find something that are interesting here in this blind spot that organizations don't know they were doing in a unique way, so to say, or they didn't know at all that they had a structural way to do things. They just were doing it. So the assessors will obviously focus on that part here, and maybe find things quite unique in this corner of the woods here, where and it's to be compared with the assumption that organizations may think that they have a very good practice, or best practice, or good practice. They may think they're all really good, but it's not up to them to figure that out. They may think that if they have good results, but is the approach a good practice? The assessors will focus into that in order to determine whether it is one. Now, been talking about good practice. What do we consider to be a good practice? Just a few key words that you have here, and they're all critical in my view. One has to be aligned with the strategy. In other words, is what am I doing here deployment of my strategy, or is it something that, well, I have a great idea, I'm doing this here, but, well, it's not really serving the purpose. I mean, its purpose is not necessary to serve my strategy. So this one thing is, I want to go here, I want to serve my customers, increase satisfaction of customers, I'm doing something that's clearly aligned. Second, is it deployed? And I've insisted a bit on that point. Is it deployed in all the areas where it is relevant for it to be deployed? Is it assessed and refined? And does it have, we've not talked about that yet, clear, visible impact on the results? Result being themselves derived from, say, from a scorecard that you've started, you documented from your strategy. So am I doing all these things? So these, my views, are critical elements looking at a good practice. And that last bit, obviously, is quite critical as well. Am I really impacting in the way my strategy said I should be impacting? Now, the way we are documenting those good practices is through the assessment. The assessors will look at an organization, visit them, do a set of interviews, and from that point, identify if indeed all these things have been properly done. And then this last bit is more of a practical element. Assessors, for us, are independent, or people working in other organizations that are not from the organization at stake itself. People with different background, they get a management document, basically where the organizations defines who they are, what the strategy is, the organization structure, what is the strategy, what are the deployments or the approaches they've put in place, a set of results, so forth. From that point, then the assessors will look at the document and get a proper understanding of what this organization is about. And here already, they know where they might find a good practice, where the organization says, well, we're doing this here, fully aligned, fully deployed, and the results are outstanding. But then we don't just look at what the organization says. The assessors will conduct sort of interviews at all levels of the organization, from the top down or from bottom up, as you wish. In the end, it's about not understanding only what management says. We have this plan, we're doing it. It's also understanding what people think is happening. Yeah, management says we have this plan. Yes, but in the end, well, they're doing this other plant or this other office. We don't do it here. Yeah, we did this last year. We stopped because we didn't like it. So this is also we get a feel for the actual penetration of those this approach. And then in the end, the assessor team can detect or can confirm possibly some things they saw in the preparation phase and confirm through a set of interviews and additional documents they may see in the organization. So this is quite a structured process in the end and going through different stages I defined earlier in terms of deployment assessment and so forth. And so at the end of that process, that the assessor team will say, yes, this organization is doing something really good in having agile management, for instance. Now, the structure behind, the structure that is used by the assessor to go through that process is quite structured, sorry for repeating, but it's quite defined. In other words, you look at, you remember one of the first slides I had before where with this 9 criteria model here with enablers on one side and the results on the other. When we look at enablers to define how mature enablers are, in other words, how mature they are, we look at a number of things. We look at whether this approach here is sound. In other words, is it aligned with strategy? You're doing this here, you're training people to speak Chinese, but in the end, you have no plan to go to China. Okay. Is it sound? Is it integrated? In other words, here, integrated is about whether the approaches are coherent overall. It creates a coherent set of approaches that in the end will be aligned with your strategy. Is it implemented? Is it deployed at the proper place, systematically, with the right timing? Are you measuring the outcome of this approach? Are you learning from others in order to improve that? And you're innovating in these approaches. And so you'll see later on in the scoring card that the assessor will go through these different steps to define whether, yes, indeed, this is done thoroughly. And the same goes for results with different parameters, obviously, because we're talking here about results. Are the results looking at the right scope? If you're looking at customer satisfaction, but you're only measuring satisfaction for, say, 30% of your customer base, then you're not doing a good job. The scope is going to be poor. If you're covering 80% is the most critical of your customers, then scope is going to be good. Can you trust the data you get? Is it robust? Do you have proper segmentation? In other words, are you going to use this data to address your temporary workers and your full-time workers, men and women, older, younger? Are you able to manage, to understand people engagement from different segments? Now, if you look at the results then, what are the trends? Are you improving over time, constantly? Are you, it's up and down? Are you hitting your targets? Are you, I apologize, I keep skipping here. Are you comparing those results? Rather, how does that compare with the best in class, the best in your region, the best in that market? And can you also link the result you achieved with the actions you put in place in the first place? So again, the assessor will go through this list here and look in a structured way how the organization is doing. And this is, you can't read, but in other words, here, if you look at the neighbors, this is how the assessors will score. You'll find here different elements I showed you earlier about enablers, and up above and top have unable to demonstrate, limited ability to demonstrate, able to demonstrate, fully able to demonstrate, and recognized as a global role model. So your different levels, if you take one, for instance, it's implemented. Yeah, I guess it's still implemented, but it's not fully yet implemented, sorry. Are you measuring? Well, in that case, yeah, you're fully able to show that they're measuring it. Same could go for sound. Is it aligned with your strategy? Yes, really, this is spot on. And in the end, you're going to get a score. Obviously, in order for an approach to be a best practice, a good practice, you want to be on the right-hand side here. You may be I know, very good here, sound, it's integrated, the set's good set, but at the same time, it's not really well deployed. You're not measuring at all. In the end, you may have a line like that. So what we're looking for is a proper implementation at these different levels. Let me now look at a couple examples of things that have come up through this process. And let me say one thing, it's not about the good idea. It's not necessarily about, yes, it's an innovation, it's something very good. In the end, it's about all of it. It's about a good idea, aligned, deployed, measured, assessed. It's about this whole thing. If you look, for instance, at this here, this example from Bosch. By the way, we look at good practices through the lens of the fundamental concept, the 8 element that you saw on top left before when I had the 3 elements of the model. Here, this is about leading with vision, inspiration, integrity. Bosch, very large organization. We work with them through all 5 continents. And when you have an organization like that, you may have clear leadership, expectations at the top, culture, you want to push it down, vision also, values. But in the end, how is that percolating? In the end, in a place, a plant in Indonesia, how is that lived? Do they know the mission? Are they living the values? Is the leadership behaving also in line with what's expected at the top? Is it similar to what's done in Mexico? And what we've seen here in this case is that there is really a good practice in the way, in the approach, the way they go at deploying that, but also the way they look at it and deploy it through all their organization, measure it, and refine over time. And so this leads to full alignment of their units. We've done global assessment with them that is assessing plants around the world, and we're able to identify that indeed values are mostly shared, leadership practices are mostly common. Obviously there are areas for improvement, but in the end, this is outstanding deployment that is obviously well designed, but well deployed and so forth, and measured with proper set of KPIs, top down, bottom up. In the end, leads into engaged personnel, quality, and also flexibility of organization, but with clear leadership. Another element here, another example comes from BMW. We work a lot with one of the major plants at BMW, 10,000 people, and agility is really critical for them. They produce something like 8 or 9 different models on the same line, batch size of 1, so great variability, ability to introduce new models also every 6 months. So it's critical for their business. In the end, how do they go about that? They know this, so there's a strategic element to that. They need to increase the flexibility even further. And then put in place approaches, to do that. So there's obviously clear alignment with strategy, and a set of approaches to do that through training, putting in place culture of continuous improvement, closed loops in terms of lessons learned, and other things that you can see here. One thing not to forget is quite critical is also daily Gemba work. In other words, management goes on the shop floor on a regular basis. They have a wheel where the management turn the wheel, and one department will be picked every 2 weeks, I think, and then the management team will spend 2 hours in that area. So no one knows where the management is going to come. So they're all ready at all times, and it shows level of readiness that's outstanding in deploying all the things that are part of this approach. They've also put in place a number of things to manage increased flexibility, because there's not just model change, there's also volume change over time, so you need to be able to adapt. In the end, that leads to high quality level, flexibility, and a reduced cost per unit. But this is, again, a complete set of approaches that's been clearly aligned with the strategy, properly deployed, refined, assessed and refined. I have a third and last example. Here we are with a Danish company called Grundfos. They make pumps. They're one of the global leaders in making pumps, about 20,000 employees. Work with them globally. We just did a global assessment for them, all continents. But here, one of the strong things they do very well is building, deploying the strategic planning process, or strategic plan rather. And well, they use the EFQM quite a bit in doing that, to achieve outstanding results over time. Strategic plan being here, they feed through a number of elements from corporate, if it's one of the units, obviously external signals, the market, new technologies and so forth, competition, but also clearly closing the loop, looking at assessment from previous cycle, looking at gaps, and identifying from that what they should feed into the strategic plan in order to, again, steer in the right direction over time by just doing slight adjustments so that performance can be achieved over time. Deployment is done also in a very structural way with a clear set of KPIs that's cascaded down at different units, and then reads into maturity, self-assessment, and closing the loop back up. And this process is not only deployed throughout the units, but also it's measured, it's refined over time, and again, this is a very good practice. So 3 examples in quite different areas, but in the end, it's not about the innovative idea, it's more about strong approaches that are clearly aligned with the strategy, very well deployed, measured, assessed, keeping also long-term horizon, long-term objective. And these various good practices are then documented in agreement with the organizations, shared on a knowledge base. But in the end, in paper, it's difficult to grasp everything because you need to visit the organization to really understand how this works, how they live through that. That's it. Thank you.